We're going to talk now about your food safety management system. And so you've got a paper that looks like this. And if you've taken this course in the past, then you know that the ServSafe book relied heavily upon the HACCP program, so the Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. It's a specific type of program that you can implement, but not many restaurants or food establishments do. So instead, they have changed how they teach this, and instead, now we're focusing more on a broader term called Food Safety Management System. And within that system, you may choose to use a HACCP program, but you're not required to. So let's talk about a food safety management system. As a manager, you're responsible for the safety of your food establishment. And so you're going to develop procedures and practices that help keep people safe and ultimately to help avoid foodborne illnesses. It is an active program. We want to make sure that we are doing things before they become a problem to help avoid problems, because you'll remember that it takes 2 people to have a confirmed case of a foodborne illness to be considered an outbreak. Now, I want to make sure that you understand that 2 or more people have to have the same symptoms after eating the same food. There must be an investigation done by the state and local regulatory authorities, and also that the outbreak is confirmed by laboratory analysis. And so when people say that they got sick eating at a food establishment, there are a number of things that need to happen before it's considered an outbreak. But we want to avoid that. Okay, so following along on the page, you'll notice that there are 5 common risk factors for foodborne illnesses. And so we could start at where we get our foods. So we're purchasing them from unsafe sources, maybe non-approved sources. We're not cooking them correctly to the correct times and temperatures. And then maybe we're not holding them correctly. Our coolers aren't cool enough. We're not getting foods held correctly once we're done cooking them. We might have problems with contaminated equipment, or it may be the employee's poor personal hygiene. So as you're thinking about those common risk factors, you can think about the flow. Where do we purchase it from? How is it cooked? How is it stored? What equipment are we using? And who is involved in the process? And so all of those can become risks. Now, we want to be active in how we have our management systems. And so to actively do these things, we need to have proactive systems instead of reactive systems. We're making decisions before they become a problem. So we can do things like training programs, manager supervision. We can incorporate SOPs, or standard operating procedures, and any place that you work has some standard operating procedures, how they do things to keep them safe. And then like I already mentioned, you may choose to do a more rigorous approach, which is called a HACCP program, a Hazard Analysis Critical Control Point. Okay, now when you are implementing an active managerial control plan, there are a few things that you need to keep in mind, or principles. And you'll notice on the paper that there are 6 principles. And you're going to be responsible for those bold typed words on there. And so some of the things that you need to keep in mind are identifying risks. So we're going to find and identify potential foodborne illness risks. And then we're going to try to control or eliminate them. We're going to monitor all of the critical activities of our operation. We're going to make notes of where employees must monitor food safety requirements. For example, when temperatures need to be taken on foods. We're going to take corrective action. So if things are done incorrectly, we're going to fix it. We're going to have management oversight. So we're verifying, we're watching to see are policies and procedures being used correctly. And if not, we're fixing that. We're going to make sure that we're training our employees to follow those procedures. And then we need to also reevaluate periodically. Now, if you've taken this course before, you know that that sounds very similar to the principles of the HACCP program. But you will be responsible for knowing those bold terms for your test. And they're going to give you a question that might try to give you 3 possible terms and which one makes sense for the action that they're taking. Okay, now the FDA, now you remember the FDA is the Food and Drug Administration. They've also developed some recommendations for how we reduce our risks for foodborne illnesses. And they did these to protect public health. So they want to see these things taking place. They want to see that you can demonstrate knowledge, yourself and your employees. Do you have health controls to make sure that people are doing the correct things for their personal hygiene? This one is funny. I find it humorous in how they word it. Controlling hands as a vehicle of contamination. But the big idea here is understanding that our hands are a huge source of risk because they carry viruses and bacteria. And as we know, people in general don't wash their hands correctly, and so they're high risk of transmitting bacteria and viruses. They want to make sure, the FDA wants to make sure that we have parameters for how we're doing our times and temperatures for controlling pathogens. And we've talked about what temperature do you need to cook specific foods to, and how long do you need to hold that temperature for. And then they're also giving out consumer advisories. So if you're designing menus, you'll have parameters about what you can write, what you need to write on your menus about serving raw or undercooked items. And so that is there for the consumer to read and then make decisions about their own personal health. All right, so as you look over this paper, there's a lot of information on there, and I want to make sure that you've got a general idea that this is all just a system that we're using to be active managers, and that we've got risks that we need to be aware of. We also need to have active processes that we're putting into place and principles that we're putting into place. And we also need to be aware that the FDA has also come up with their own unique system for doing this as well. So you want to look this over before the test, get a good working knowledge, especially of those bold terms.